We know that the Church of St Giles existed before Elgin Cathedral was built, and the Muckle Kirk, as it became known, occupied this site for over 700 years, before it was demolished to make way for the present building in 1827. The church in Scotland enjoyed a golden era throughout the 12th and 13th centuries, with Elgin Cathedral at the centre of a diocese which stretched into Banshire, up Speyside, and round the coast past Inverness, all part of the vast Church of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church. Abbeys, priories, and outlying chapels were built, all serving the local hub, which was Elgin Cathedral. We see the legacy of that today, of that era today, in the names of local streets, such as Blackfriars, Greyfriars, and Mason Dew. The original St Giles Church and the cathedral were burned by the local Baedner when he ventured down to Murray in 1890. But the walls survived and the church was rebuilt. The Reformation of 1560 saw the overthrow of the Roman Catholic Church in Scotland. Elgin Cathedral was abandoned. St Giles became an Episcopal church for a time, then became Presbyterian with the Revolution settlement of 1688, and was then known as the parish church. Out went the altar, and in came the communion table. Elgin and the surrounding area suffered greatly from the effects of loss of the cathedral, which had for so many years been the focal point of Christian and business life in the area. The Muckle Kirk was not a thing of beauty, though held in reverence by many townspeople. There was much anguish in 1826 when it was demolished to make way for a new building. The Church of Scotland was in a somewhat uncomfortable position in the early 1980s due to dissent on various issues, but especially that of patronage, i.e. who should appoint the minister. It was a time, however, when the Church of Scotland Development Committee masterminded the construction of a significant number of new churches, St Giles Elgin being one of them. The new St Giles was not only a symbol of spiritual life in Elgin, it was a stamp of confidence in the future of the town. However, only 15 years after the new St Giles had been built, the minister, Reverend Top, and most of his elders walked out in May 1843 to join the Free Church movement in what was known as the Disruption. That incidentally led to the building of a large number of new churches and mansions under the Free Church banner, as well as other denominations. We are today still reaping the costly harvest, nearly 180 years later, as church after church becomes vacant. The Church of Scotland and St Giles Church here recovered and drove forward in confidence. In 1897, the congregation built a suite of halls in Greyfriars Street, and at the turn of the century began planning further expansion, resulting in the construction of our daughter church, St Columba's in Moss Street in 1906. The style of architecture applied to St Giles, though elegant, incorporates details which are prone to decay, and that imposes a heavy financial responsibility on the congregation, despite strenuous efforts to foresee problems. Removal of the urn from the top of the tower in 1995 was seen by some as a symbol of the decay which had set into Elgin High Street following pedestrianisation, and the consequent severe restriction on vehicle movement. The act of erecting a replacement urn some 6 years later may have been a symbol of recovery in High Street fortunes, but that's very much open to debate. Vehicle access restrictions spelt the end of weddings and funerals here in St Giles, and it's fortunate that the congregation could fall back on the accommodation available at St Columba's Church in Moss Street, now St Columba's South. About 10 years ago, the halls at Greyfriars Street were sold off and a new hall was built in the grounds of St Columbus South, called the Williamson Hall, providing the congregation and the community with modern, accessible hall facilities. In recent years, up to the start of COVID-19 lockdown, services were held on alternate months, St Giles one month, St Columbus the next. But the restrictions now imposed have resulted in all services being held at St Giles for the time being. The Church of St Giles has faced many storms, but few have presented challenges as great as COVID-19. However, we must move forward in faith